What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In this episode I'm going to be installing a propane tank in the van. I actually haven't seen anybody else do it this way. I'm sure maybe somebody out there has. From what I've seen online, everybody keeps installing this same tremendous tank, and I actually ordered this tank and it was delivered to me and it was just way too big, and then you have to cut the brackets off like I see a lot of people doing on YouTube and make all these alterations, and then you still have this huge tank that doesn't really fit in the ProMaster. And the other option is to put like a barbecue tank inside the van and then do like a sealed container like I've done before, but that just takes up a lot of space inside the van. What I've come up with is I found a smaller propane tank that people use on the Volkswagen Vanagons, like the Volkswagen buses, and here it is right here. It's a much smaller tank, plenty big for what I'm going to be doing in this van, just having a cooktop and a tankless water heater for the shower out the back. So it's going to be more than enough for that. I'm not going to be using this for heating the van. I'll have a diesel heater for that. I think I've got it all figured out, so let's get started. One more thing I forgot to mention on last episode is don't forget to run your wire for the controller for the diesel heater. So I'll end up mounting this in the wall somewhere like that. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're going to need to do this. First, of course, is the tank. These aren't particularly cheap, but I think it's worth the money to save the space. And then when you buy the tank, you could add on these brackets, which will go under the wood here and give it some extra strength. It's pretty thick metal. Comes with all the bolts that we'll need. So if you remember when I said everything's done in a very specific order, now I'm about to break that rule because I'm gonna have to pull that middle plywood panel up to install the tank. And I actually knew I was gonna have to do that, but wasn't actually like 100% sure if I was gonna use this tank when I started the van build. But if I were to do this again, before you put the subfloor in, the very first day would be installing the propane tank. So we've got some pipe sealant. The other thing we're gonna need, this is sold separately, remote fill. Since we're gonna be mounting the tank like kind of directly in the middle of the van, you'll need a remote fill so the guy at the propane place can fill it. And this I got off eBay. I'll put a link for this. And this includes the two hoses, one for the bleeder valve, one for the fill, and then all this hardware that connects everything. Then that'll be for the remote fill. From the tank right here, we'll have a fitting, and then we're gonna switch to this copper coil. And for that, you'll need this flare tool, which will enable us to connect some of these fittings I got from Home Depot, these flare fittings. So with the flare fittings, you don't need any kind of sealant or anything. With the regular threaded fittings, you do need sealant. This is the gas sealant. You could also use the yellow tape, but make sure you don't use the white tape. That's only for water. So the first thing I want to do, I think, is mount this to the side of the van. It's really difficult to find a good place to mount this because, as you can see, it's got the two flat things. So it wants to mount on like a flat spot up like that. But there really isn't anywhere to mount it. You could cut a little bit of the bumper off down here, not the bumper, the plastic over the bumper, and mount it like that, but it's not really a good idea if you're going over like a steep incline. This could rub in the back. You're not supposed to do that. Where I think we're gonna install it is right over here onto this lip here, and we're gonna have to drill through to make that work. So that's the first thing we're gonna do. So actually, I think before I even mount this, I'm going to make the connections on here. It'll be a little easier to have it all connected before I get under the van. So I'm gonna add some of the pipe sealant. Just roughly look like that. Same with this one. So that's in now, and then there's two more that go on the other side. Okay, so that's what that should look like. Now we're gonna see if we could figure a way to mount it. And remember, there's two types of gas fittings. This one has both. It's got the regular threaded one here, and then the flare fitting there. Any of these regular threaded ones always need some kind of pipe sealant, either the sealant or the yellow tape, but the flare fittings never get any sealant. That's because the seal is actually at the flare here on this one, not the threads. This one, the seal is at the threads. So if you were to add sealant on a flare fitting, you could actually cause a leak because the flare wouldn't be able to sit and make that seal there properly. If you have sealant on this, it would push it back. So never put sealant on a flare fitting. Okay, so I decided on a location to mount it, and you can see that little notch right there. And I know it's not ideal to mount it by a door or a window, but that little built-in notch right there is too hard to resist. That's where I'm gonna mount it, and I'll show you why. So because of this little thing here, that's as high up as it can go when I mount it, because it hits that bolt there. But if I mount it here at the notch, it could actually go up that extra 1/4 inch like that. So I made a few Sharpie marks where I'm going to drill the holes. There's gonna be 2 holes, one there. Then I kept moving this one around, but I decided on this one, the little X right there. So there and there. Got my drill bit, which is about the same size as the little stainless bolts I'm gonna use. I'll put some paint on that. So I just dabbed some paint, some Rust-Oleum paint on both sides of the hole there. Now I'm gonna hold up the frame, mark where the 2 holes come out on the bracket there. We'll put some more paint on that as well. Came out great. Using the screw gun really cinches it down. It's a lot more sturdy than I thought it was going to be. That's how that looks from back here. And that yellow cap is actually removable, so what I'm gonna do when I get some spare time, I'm gonna remove it and spray paint it black and put it back on so it's a little less noticeable. I've got the 2 hoses, one for the remote fill, one for the pressure relief valve, the thicker ones for the remote fill, obviously. So on each end, you're going to need to slide this over the hose up until it hits that backing point there. So it has to slide all the way over like that. Once that's over there like this, then you screw this in. And once this is tightened all the way down, that should be a airtight connection. So if you've ever seen anybody put these on before, this is always the hardest part, getting this nut over. It took me about 10 minutes just like forcing it back and forth until I got it seated all the way up against the nut like that. I've seen some people put like a socket over it, finding this size socket and then connecting it to a drill and just trying to put it on like that, but I was able to do it, just took a little while. And what helped me was kind of cleaning up the edges here, so it would slide over the nut a little better. Kind of tapered it just a tad and took off those like dirty edges. So I'm not going to do this side yet because I won't know the exact length until I have the tank up there. Then I'll cut it to the perfect length so I don't have a lot of extra left over. But I do need to do one side of this one also, so I'm just going to repeat that process. All right, I'm gonna give this a shot because this smaller one's actually harder to get on than the bigger one. Let's see if this helps. Okay, it's working. That's a lot easier. Okay, done. Use that. That worked. That saved about 10 minutes using the drill, so definitely if you have a socket that could fit around these, that's the way to go. All right, well, after all that, that's one connection done. That one should work. So next on the tank, we need to connect the parts that came with the remote fill. That'll be this. This will connect here. This will just be hand tightened on. So that goes on there like that. And then the larger hose will connect to that. And then for the smaller hose, we need to unscrew this pressure relief valve here, and then screw in this elbow, which the smaller hose will connect to the flare fitting side. And then I need to put a 1/2-inch fitting on this end here. So here's the 1/2-inch fitting. It's regular thread on this side, and then flare fitting on that side. I'll just screw in there. And then all of the regular threading ones, we're gonna add the yellow gas pipe thread sealant. By the way, when you screw this one in, be real careful. Don't just take a wrench on this and start going in that way. Make sure you have a wrench holding this here first, and then a second wrench on this, because you don't want to put the pressure and twist the pressure regulator here. They say that in the instructions. So okay, you can see I've got everything on now, ready to mount this pretty much. So the next thing I need to do is just remove this middle piece of plywood here. Really hard to film under here, but what I'm going to do is wedge this up here, make a couple Sharpie marks where the bolts are going to go through, and then drill up so I can see the holes from the top, and then I'll finish it. All right, better idea. Instead of trying to hold that whole thing up there and marking it, what I'm going to do is actually just hold this on one side where I know it's going to go, because these holes are actually perfectly lined up. And once I have the first 2 holes, I can thread one side on through the holes and then mark the second 2 from the top actually. Okay, I started off with 2 smaller holes in the bottom. You can see I got really lucky right in between the 2 beams, so I don't have to redo those, move them around. So now I'm just going to pull this piece of insulation up, make this hole a little bit wider and that one a little bit wider, and then I'm going to lay the tank upside down here so that we could find the other 2 spots for the holes and drill those out. Now we should be able to mark these 2 holes and drill these out. So these are the little brackets that you can order with the tank. I'm just putting 2 bolts and washers through. And then these are gonna go, as soon as that paint dries, these are gonna go through here. All right, I got this tacked up here loosely. I was able to do it on my own. The easiest way is to have somebody hold the bolt up top, and then you can kind of crank these down. I was able to just put the wrench there and then tighten it down. That worked like that. The wrench is just stuck up against here. Okay, that worked perfectly with the wrench there. I was able to tighten it down from the bottom with the impact driver, and it's really secure, so it's not going anywhere. So now I'm gonna put the foam back over, put the plywood back down, and then I'm gonna make the final connections there with the hose. Okay, so I'm gonna connect the 2 hoses here and here. And remember, these are flare fittings, so no sealant. Okay, those 2 went on really easy. So now I'm just gonna run these over this way, right into our remote fill. So I'm going to take my measurements now and figure out where I want to cut this. And then we have to put the fitting on the other side of it. And then we'll tack everything up neatly with some clamps. And then the only other thing I'll need to do is run the copper tubing from here. I'll have to flare the copper tubing. I'm gonna run that. I'm gonna run one line up right around here, for the stove, and a second line into the back for the tankless water heater for the outdoor shower. All right, just cut that with the snips. This is right at the right length. So now I'm gonna use the impact driver, put this guy on. All right, so next thing I need to do is just tack everything up here, like this. So I'm going to use this kit to tack the tubing up there, up against the bottom of the van. And I'm just going to temporarily use these screws to drill the hole and hold it up there temporarily until tomorrow. I'm going to try and find some 1¼ or 1 inch galvanized screws. So these are just temporary. You don't want to use these under the van, they're going to rust. But I also like to use these just to pre-drill the hole as well, and then switch to a galvanized screw. That way you don't have to waste your drill bits. You can use these screws. And I'll put a link for this kit because you're going to need this throughout the build to secure all the wires inside the van later on. All right, check it out. We're zip tied right there. The back, we're going over the top there, zip tied right there. Also zip tied back here. Coming over here, screwed in here. Just zip tied this one to the other one that's screwed in here. This one's also screwed in here. Coming back here. This one's screwed in here. Coming right here. And then this one kind of loops around. Screwed in here and here. And shouldn't be moving at all. Feels really secure. And then tomorrow I'll come back and replace those screws with either stainless screws or some galvanized screws. I'll see what I could find at the store. So I picked up these 1 inch stainless self-drilling screws. I got a whole box for about 30 bucks. And I'll replace all the regular screws under the van now with these. Also hit the cap with a little black paint so it's a little less noticeable. I'd say the black spray painted cap looks 100 times better than that bright yellow one. Okay, next we're going to start connecting the copper tubing. So you'll need 1 box of the copper tubing. You're also going to need a flare tool, a pipe cutter like this, or a bigger one, and some sandpaper and a bunch of fittings. So first thing I need to do before I flare the end is put the fitting over the tubing. So these are from Home Depot, 1/2 inch flares. Make sure you put this over before you flare it, because once you flare this edge, you won't be able to get the nut over. All right, so here's the flare tool. Let's open this guy up, and we're gonna give it just 1 millimeter past where it would be flush. Now tighten this set screw down so you have it in the right spot. When you set the set screw, when you have it in the right spot, it'll go right into the notch there. Kind of peek through here while you're doing it. You can see it flaring. You'll know to stop at the right time too. Back it out all the way. Back this out. Got a perfect flare. Now the nut come like that and should give us a perfect gas tight seal right there. Alright, good news, I found my good pipe cutter, so this should make things a lot easier than using the mini one. These are made for like getting in real tight spaces, like under a sink or something like that. So now we're gonna get under the van and see how far we need to make our first length. Cut it down to size, and then we're gonna attach the first T. So let's get under the van and I'll show you what I need. Alright, so I think what I'm gonna do is come out this way, straight out to over here, and put the T right here, kind of like this. One going to the back and one going to the front. I'll stay out of the way of any moving parts like the suspension. It'll curve around here, I'll secure it up, go back to where the water heater is gonna be, and then this one will come up and punch through probably somewhere about right here for the cooktop. All right, that's just hand tightened on there. So the pilot hole came up right there, and I'm gonna just enlarge it a little bit. So I've got it tacked up, coming back. And now I just need to cut it right here and put a flare on that. Now we're gonna test my flare skills under the van. See if we can make this come out right. All right, I think we're done under the van. Everything's secured. It's not moving at all. Coming out here, we got the T going back to the water heater. This one coming back for the stove, coming up right here. We'll put some marine sealant around this. Seal that off nicely, same in the back. And then the fill lines are coming out. They're all secured up as well. Right over here, the remote fill. So now all I need to do is put the valve on here and the one in the back. And then we can take this and fill up the tank and test it out for leaks. Now we're going to take a 1/2" male gas fitting. It's got a flare on this side, which will connect like that, and this side, which will connect to the valve. We'll tighten that down with a wrench and then put the valve on right here. All right, that one's done. I just need to do the front one, same thing. When I lay the floor down and put the cabinet over this, I'll be able to take this top part off, so that I only have to make a hole the size of the flare nut here.
Well, I'm not good in the smell, so make sure once you park it somewhere, wherever, make sure you have check the smell that it's not leaking or anything.
So you just wait for it to come out of, start the liquid coming out of the small pipe, or what?
First thing means it has like air in it.
Well, it probably has air in it.
Right. So once you put the gas, the air will come out there. How big is it?
3.3 gallon, I think, or something. Wow, I was a little worried that wasn't going to work, but actually everything went in perfectly. Now I'm just going to drive home and I can test all the different connections, make sure there's no leaks. I just have the tank closed right now, so when I get home I can check for the leaks everywhere else. All right, I got the van back home now, and I was actually kind of shocked how easy that filled up. For some reason I thought this valve was going to give me an issue, but propane went right in without a problem. So now I can turn this valve on and then check all the connections for a leak. I have a spray bottle, an empty spray bottle I just mixed with some soapy water. I'll just spray it on each connection and see if there's any bubbles. All right, I sprayed all the connections on the seams here. It looks like I do have one leak. It's this pipe here. It's because you can see it bubbling up because I bent this pipe a little bit too much. I made it too short and then I tried to bend it, so it's leaking at both joints. So I'll need to just shut this down here, and then I just have to cut a longer piece here and try and redo this. All right, I was able to put like a little more of a bend in that, so there would be less stress on the two joints, and everything's on now. And I sprayed some more soapy water on it, and it's no longer leaking, so that solved it. Definitely want to make sure you check every connection, so you don't want to have any leaks. But it's pretty obvious when it's leaking. It just starts bubbling up with the soapy water. Okay, I think that's going to do it for today. Let me know what you guys think of this solution for the propane. I think it's the best option. If anyone has any better ideas, let me know in the comments. They do also sell a slightly larger tank. This one's 3.3 gallons, and they sell like a 5.6 gallons, which could be a good option too. But it has different brackets to connect it, so that's the main reason I didn't use it. Plus, I think for only needing a cooktop and a water heater, I think the 3.3 gallons should be more than enough when I had the 5-gallon barbecue tank in the van, I used it for over 6 months and never had to refill it. So I think this size tank will work out well. There's a lot more to come, so please make sure you guys subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I'll see you guys next time.